I'm Roger DeRose. At Kessler Foundation, we're committed to changing the lives of people with disabilities through research and employment strategies. And that's why we're proud to support programming produced by the Caucus Educational Corporation and their partners in public television.
This special edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center. Funding has been provided by Hackensack University Health Network, County College of Morris, connecting learning and life, PSE&G, committed to improving New Jersey's economy and strengthening its communities, MD Advantage Insurance Company of New Jersey, Wells Fargo, Celgene Corporation, committed to improving the lives of patients worldwide, and by Kessler Foundation, changing the lives of people with disabilities. Promotional support provided by the Star Ledger, powering NJ.com, and by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association and its monthly magazine, New Jersey Business.
This is One-on-One.
When you first heard that they were doing Charlie Rose and Gayle King, didn't you go, what?
People like laughing at others, so I don't mind if the other is me.
See, you go right into the character. That's what it is.
I'm bringing families together a half an hour each week. Man, I'm doing something special.
And so I do feel successful.
Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. Welcome to the Tisch WNET studio here in the heart of New York City. It's my pleasure to introduce a very interesting author who has wrote a very important book. He is Alvin Townley. He is the author of Defiant, the American POWs who endured Hanoi's most infamous prison, the women who fought for them, and the one who did not return. I want to thank you for joining us. The book, set it up for us.
Yeah, I know I wrote it, so I'm probably a little bit biased, but if you can get beyond that, this is the best story I have ever heard, and it's one that I think a lot of America doesn't know, and I came across it and discovered really the Dirty Dozen or the Band of Brothers story of Vietnam. And there were 11 POWs that were in the Hanoi Hilton out of 500 who the North Vietnamese identified as the most obnoxious, uncooperative, and subversive. And they were so subversive, they were ruining the entire re-education program that the North Vietnamese were trying to implement. So they kicked these 11 guys out of the Hanoi Hilton and sent them to this prison called Alcatraz.
The Alcatraz 11.
Exactly.
Right.
And so that's how they became known as the Alcatraz 11. And it's an extraordinary story that we'll talk about. But on the flip side, back home, they had wives. And 3 of the wives of these Alcatraz 11 founded the National League of POW MIA Families. So if you ever wore a POW wristband or if you've ever seen the black and white POW flag, that is the movement that 3 of the wives of the Alcatraz 11 started. So it's just an amazing story of just human resilience and perseverance and faith that happens, in Hanoi and in America. It's amazing.
What made you write it?
My first book was about Eagle Scouts. That's how I got my start. And one of the guys I met was an Eagle Scout named George Coker. And he told me his story about being a POW in Vietnam. And he and I stayed in touch. And a couple years later, he and I were talking, and he mentioned something about the Alcatraz 11, just in passing. I said, well, Commander Coker, what's that? And he said, I never told you? I said, no, sir. And so he told me the story of these 11 guys who are basically the leaders and the real reprobates of POW. So Commander Coker and Captain McKnight both escaped while they were over there. They made it 15 miles before they got caught. And that's one of the best stories in the book. Jim Stockdale was really the leader of this group, and he went on to receive the Medal of Honor. Jeremiah Denton became a U.S. Senator, and Sam Johnson still is a congressman from Texas.
By the way, James Stockdale, in fact, was on a presidential ticket.
That's right. So many people remember him. Sadly,
Admiral Stockdale.
It's Phil Hartman from Saturday Night Live, and they don't remember.
He was confused and was disoriented in the campaign, but what kind of man was he during the war?
He was an extraordinary man, and Jim Stockdale is one of the best leaders America has ever had. The man received the Medal of Honor, and he kept all these POWs together in just the worst circumstances.
Describe the circumstances so people really understand. By the way, go out and get the book called Defiant. You'll describe it, but you'll only do the PBS version of it in the time we have. But go ahead, talk about it.
It's an amazing book. But the circumstances when these guys got shot down, remember, these were fighter pilots. So if you know any fighter pilots, you know that they are confident, they're in control, and every fighter pilot thinks he's the best fighter pilot in the entire world. So these guys that are confident in control of their worlds, all of a sudden end up in a POW camp. And all they have left is their name and their honor. So they have to fight a very, personal struggle. So the picture here is the Hanoi March. So the North Vietnamese people in Hanoi were angry with the POWs, and the government decided they needed some fresh meat. And so they paraded about 60 POWs through the streets. And this is the beginning of the march. And this is Admiral Bob Shoemaker is the gentleman in the second row on the left. And he's one of the heroes of Defiant. But they paraded these men through the streets, and after about the first mile, it became a riot. And so the guards you see on the side stopped kind of controlling the prisoners and started trying to control the mobs of people that were throwing stuff and trying to attack the American pilots, all in violation of the Geneva Convention, which North Vietnam didn't acknowledge, which led to the torture, the beatings, the propaganda statements, all the terrible things that our servicemen, our pilots had to endure. And they all tried their best to uphold the code of conduct. And when they
tortured them, didn't they?
They did. And you can read about it in the book. And at some point, they couldn't hold the code of conduct, which says they are only allowed to give their name, rank, service number, and date of birth when they're captured. But they came up with their own code, and Admiral Stockdale was one of the people that developed this code so that among themselves, they had a way to return with honor.
That's Stockdale. That's Admiral Stockdale.
That's Jim Stockdale, and you can see the intensity in his eyes. I mean, he was such an intense man, highly philosophical. So he was a philosopher. He has a master's degree from Stanford. And when you read the book, you really get an insight into some of the philosophy that let him survive. Because remember, these guys were in solitary confinement for over 5 years in some cases.
Solitary confinement.
So the only way they could communicate was through something called the tap code.
Describe it.
Picture the alphabet, 26 letters. You take out the letter K, and you're going to substitute C for K. So now you have 25 letters, which you put in a 5x5 matrix. Across the top, you have A, B, C, D, E, and down the bottom, or down the left side, you have A, F, L, Q, V. So if you want to communicate the letter B, for example, you tap once because it's on the first row, and twice because it's on the second column. So these guys they had nothing but time, but they would just sustain each other by sending laboriously these messages through the walls in tap code. And if you think my generation started, texting, it was these guys. They would say things like GN for good night, GBU for God bless you, and all these abbreviated communications to keep each other motivated, to keep each other focused, to help them.
5 years.
Well, Admiral Shoemaker was there for 8, but they were in solitary for about 5 of that.
Jeremiah Denton. Describe the scene.
Jeremiah Denton was, I think, maybe the 13th POW taken in July. In April, he got worked over for several days by this guy named Pig Eye. And when you read the book, you'll meet Pig Eye. And he was just a malicious torturer, and he was the guy that tortured everybody. They tortured Denton to behave in an interview they were giving to a Japanese journalist. So they had told him to answer the questions the way they wanted him to answer the questions and not misbehave. And so, the interview comes, Jeremiah Denton walks in there, he's in this prison garb, kind of a pajama suit, and sits down, and first, he doesn't answer the questions the way he was supposed to. So he basically defies his captors when he knows what's going to happen to him when the camera goes off. He knows he's going to get beaten. But the most ingenious thing, though, was that he sat there giving his interview, answering the questions this journalist was asking him, and he was blinking torture with his eyes in Morse code. Unbelievable.
He blinked
torture
with his eyes.
Again and again in Morse code, just using his eyes, giving an answer, and he had the presence of mind. I'm trying to remember the right blinks. Had the presence of mind to blink that message over and over again. And that was one of the first concrete indications that America had that our POWs were getting mistreated.
Did America do enough to bring it back?
So America did nothing. So Jane Denton, Sybil Stockdale, the wives of these POWs were told, ma'am, your husband's been shot down. We think he's alive. North Vietnam's not telling us. We're not sure. But if he is, I'm sure they're treating him fine, and we'll take care of it. You don't say anything. You keep quiet. Don't talk to the press. Don't talk to anybody. So this is 1965, 66, and these are military spouses, military wives. So they did what they were told and trusted the government for about 2 or 3 years. And finally, through some amazing clandestine communication, which you can read about as well, These wives learned their husbands were being kept in leg irons and being tortured, and the government was doing nothing. So they formed the National League of POW MIA Families. And so if you ever worn a POW wristband or seen that black and white POW flag, that's the organization they formed to rally America and rally our government to bring these guys home. If it hadn't been for the wives, I don't know if the guys would have made it.
The book is called Defiant, and the author is Alvin Townley, and we suggest everyone go out there and buy it. Alvin has given us just a little bit of a sense of what this book is about. It's an important book for all of us to understand, because these men and the women who were with them suffered so much on our behalf, and the government clearly did not do enough. Thank you for your work.
Pleasure, Steve.
Appreciate it. Stay with us. We'll be right back right after this from the Tisch WNYC studio right here at Lincoln Center. Thank you very much.
If you would like more information on this program, or if you'd like to express an opinion, email us at info@caucusnj.org. Visit us online at oneonone.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Adubato, PhD, and follow us on Twitter at Steve Adubato.
Brian Lehrer is one of the stars in the public broadcasting world. He is the host of the Brian Lehrer Show, heard every day from 10 to noon on WNYC, part of the National Public Radio family. Hey, good to see you, buddy.
Nice to see you, Steve.
You, 25th anniversary?
How about that?
That's not possible.
Time flies.
Yeah, how much do you love your job?
I love my job because I get to talk to people from all over the metro area all the time. We get to report on stories through the voices of the people who they affect, not just through the newsmakers, and we have the big newsmakers, but because it's a participatory show. And 25 years ago, we were just using the phones.
Right.
Now we're using all the social media and everything else that's available to us. We are a community forum, not just a news analysis show.
And you engage your audience, you pull them in, keep them listening. Does it bother you, and do you feel guilty, Brian, that people like Bob Morris, our director, sometimes is late for work because he's sitting there listening to you? Bob, I'm sorry, he's not late for work. Neil Shapiro, he's not late for work, you know what I mean?
No, but he's never late for work, except that it is my mission in life, hosting a show that starts at 10 a.m., to make people late for work. And they have to go to work and say what I guess your director has said to you. I couldn't stop listening to Brian Lehrer, so I'm a little late.
But don't you feel bad about that?
No.
You pull them in. You pull them in. They want to be there. But it's interesting. I thought the social media thing would bifurcate the audience, chop them up. But no?
No, you have to do everything in media today. You know, when even as far back as, say, 2008,
right.
Which was before
the explosion.
The explosion. Twitter existed, and I was tweeting in 2008 from the Democratic and Republican conventions, but it was before it really exploded. At that time, I could tell that we were going to get, in the primaries, more Hillary calls on the phone and more Obama support on our webpage.
Right.
Because of the different demographics who use it. So if you're doing a show that's not just about the news, but about community building, and you really want to reach different communities, you have to use all the tools that different communities are interacting through. But they're still all listening to radio or audio or whatever you want to call it these days.
Mm. As you listen to and are aware of other, morning or other radio in the New York market, which I know a little bit about on the commercial side, but we are the biggest fans of the public side. How would you describe the difference or the differences between what you do in talk radio and what most, I don't want to generalize, but we know what most other commercial talk radio is? What's the biggest difference?
The biggest difference is, I'll tell you it this way. Rush Limbaugh has a line that he uses sometimes.
Is he still on the air?
Yeah, he's still on the air.
I'm joking.
I think his frequency just got downgraded a little recently, but he has this line that he uses sometimes. This show is not about what you think; it's about what I think. And
That's
it's
true.
sort of a laugh line, but then again, it is absolutely true.
He doesn't care what you think.
My show really is about what everybody thinks, because we are really an open forum. And there's a lot of strong opinion that gets expressed on my show, but everybody who brings something serious to it is going to be taken seriously. And so conservatives talk to liberals, poor people talk to rich people. That's the difference.
So it's interesting. So much of commercial talk radio is about establishing personalities on the air with strong opinions, and people who usually hold those opinions listen to those folks, or people who really can't stand those people with those opinions will listen to them so they can get really angry. You are not there to say, hey, this is Brian Lehrer's opinion. That's not.
Right, that's not the point. I will express my opinion sometimes, but more as a matter of transparency. Right. More as a matter of saying, okay, putting my cards on the table, here's what I think about this.
Sure.
Now let's all have a conversation.
Not interested in being reinforced in your point of view.
Right, I'm actually, honestly, I'm interested in being challenged in my point of view, because it's not even interesting, as far as I'm concerned, for people to call up and say, oh, you're so right. You know, what is that to listen to? Let's hear people talking to each other who come from different backgrounds.
But speaking of interesting, you've had some fascinating people pick up the phone and call you over the years. Name them.
Oh, gosh. Well, one of my favorites going way back was Martin Luther King Day, 1993 or 94. We were having a conversation comparing Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And suddenly there on the phones is the tennis giant and human rights giant Arthur Ashe, who was sitting in his hospital bed where he was going to die of AIDS, unbeknownst to me and him, just a few weeks later. But he was listening to the show, and he wanted to tell a story of when he was in college, and the guys in his dorm were comparing Martin Luther King and Malcolm X at the time. And of course, he was so eloquent and unbelievable.
As always.
It gave me goosebumps just to think that he was listening. And Hillary Clinton has called in, and Alec Baldwin recently called in. A lot of people call in.
Do you ever get someone who is, you name some folks who are pretty progressive folks. Do you ever have someone call in to the right, to the pretty far right of this political spectrum, ideological spectrum, Brian, who says, Brian, I want to talk to you about something you said.
Well, regular callers all the time.
No, I'm talking about big name.
I can't think of a big name right off the top of my head who would fit that profile.
Okay. Interesting about public media, those of us in public media, whether on the television side or the radio side, but then there's also more and more convergence coming together. The part of our world, and I talk to Neil Shapiro, in all seriousness, our president, about this all the time, the challenge that we have staying in business. Do you think about it much?
Sure. Well, all media has to grow and adapt. We were talking about social media before, and how it intersects with what we do. We have a new app at WNYC that's usable for Apple or Android. And one of the features that I think we innovated on is something where people can build their own playlist of WNYC shows or WNYC segments from my show, from other shows. So because radio has come unstuck in time, all of media has come unstuck in time. It's not just what's on live from 10 a.m. to noon. That's for one audience.
That's right.
There's a whole other set of audiences out there who are using it on podcasts, other kinds of downloads, all of that stuff. And yet, radio and public media very much survives and thrives in this environment. So, some of the most listened to podcasts in America are our Radiolab podcast and Freakonomics podcast, because I think public media is not just looking for clicks. We're looking to create meaning, and I think that still matters, and their audience reflects it.
25 years on the air, you're celebrating, right? You remember the first day you got on the air?
I do.
25 years later, I mean, we just celebrated our 25th year on the air with our production, our not-for-profit production company, which is a way of saying highly entrepreneurial in a not-for-profit market,
Congratulations.
Right? Thank you. Any less passionate about what you do than when you started?
No, more. Because I've had the benefit of experience, of seeing the world change. When I started doing the show, it was September 25th, 1989. Within 6 weeks, the Berlin Wall had fallen. So obviously we had an impact. But no, seriously, what it showed me right away, hosting a
guys.
daily show, is, you know, the pace of change in our world.
Yeah.
There you go. It's just,
There you go.
just a few years ago.
Just a few years ago. Hey, listen, Brian Lehrer, who is celebrating 25 years on the air, the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC, part of the NPR system, every day from 10 to 12 in the morning, but also you can check them out. Go online. They're all over the place. Listen, can't thank you enough and wish you nothing but more success for you, but also for your audience who gets to hear you every day.
And same to you, Steve.
Very kind of you. Thank you. Stay with us. We'll be right back right after this.
If you would like more information on this program, or if you'd like to express an opinion, email us at info@caucusnj.org. Visit us online at oneonone.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Adubato, PhD, and follow us on Twitter at Steve Adubato.
Victoria Bailey is the Executive Director of the Theater Development Fund. Good to see you.
Good to see you. It's nice to be here.
The Victoria Development Fund. The Theater Development Fund is, by the way, we know what your work is because we see it out there on the street.
Outside.
The most famous is?
The TKTS booth is what we're known for first and foremost, I think, is we run the half-price ticket booth in Duffy Square. We run, and also there are satellite booths at South Street Seaport and Metrotech in Brooklyn. So
awesome.
That's the first thing everybody knows.
But you're bigger than that.
We're a lot bigger than that. We are an organization that is committed to building audiences for the theater, and we really work on two tracks. The first track is to make it possible for people to go to the theater who know they want to go, but there's a barrier. So whether it's an economic barrier, which is what the booth is about, we also have a membership program for people who live, primarily for people who live in the tri-state area, and people who qualify become TDF members, and then they're eligible to purchase tickets at an even deeper discount. And then we provide services for people with physical disabilities.
Such as?
So on our accessibility project, we do sign interpreted and open caption performances. We were the first folks to do open caption performances on Broadway. We do audio described performances for the visually impaired. We have orchestra seats for folks with mobility problems. And then most recently, an initiative we started about a year and a half ago is our Autism Theater Initiative, where we work with producers to present shows, sensory-friendly shows for children on the spectrum and their families.
Can you give us we're showing pictures as you're talking about it, but explain how that would work.
So the way that would work is we work with a producer. So we started with Lion King, and we have experts on kids on the spectrum, and they go in, they watch the show, and they say, you know, we need to tweak this a little, maybe this sound cue. There are a lot of lighting issues. We never bring the house all the way to black when we've got an autism-friendly performance, because transitions can be a challenge. So variety of tweaks in the show, and then we basically buy the house, and then we sell the house at a discounted price, and as well as for folks who can't afford tickets at all, we have a certain number of tickets that are discounted. What's really special about it, and the essence of it, is it's not just for the kids on the spectrum, it's for the kids and their families.
What's that like for them?
Because if it's a gift, because especially going to the theater, it's really hard to take a kid on the spectrum to a performance that isn't a special performance, because you may be worried that your child is going to make noise, or they're going to get up, or they're going to have an attention issue, and people all around you, there's a kind of, don't do that.
So you don't go at all?
So you don't go at all.
And you're denied that opportunity?
You're denied that opportunity. You're denied that opportunity as a family. And what's really moving is it's the child, it's their siblings, it's their parents, and they get a family outing.
What a fabulous
that a lot of us
thing.
take for granted. Yeah, it's really...
What a wonderful thing.
It's really...
So you get to see those families.
We get to see those
the children
families.
with their parents experiencing these extraordinary performances, but done in a way that is sensitive and empathetic and aware of the needs of the children who are on the autism spectrum.
On the spectrum, and also done in a way where everyone in the theater is in the same boat. So, if your kid maybe is having trouble and needs to get up, there's no one in the theater who doesn't understand that. And so it's a completely judgment-free environment, and of course that's what the theater should be for everybody.
How'd you get into this whole thing?
It started because...
it was 1968 it started?
TDF?
Yeah.
TDF started in 1968.
And when did you come into this whole thing?
I came into this whole thing about 12 years ago. I worked for many years here in New York at the Manhattan Theater Club, and I was the general manager there, and it was time to try something new. And when this came along, I thought, The thing that's so interesting about working for a service organization is we're working for the audience. And I went from being on the producing side. I really believe, TDF believes, that theater and dance are the birthright of every New Yorker, and that we have to figure out ways to get people to the theater. We work with about 7,500 New York City high school and middle school students every year in the public school system, not just the theater.
What do you mean work with them?
We have a program called Stage Doors, where the students working with their teacher and a teaching artist have 4 classroom sessions ahead of time. Is that part of what we're looking at right there? That would be Open Doors, which is our mentoring program. We're a group of 8. We have 23 groups this year. 8 students from 23 different schools go to the theater 6 times a year with a mentor who's a performing arts professional. They go to the theater. They come back, they have pizza, they talk about it, they go back to their school, they write in their journals. And the idea is that we are training people to be long-term, sustainable audience members. Theater is something you have to be exposed to.
Why do you do it at a young age? Why is it so important that they get exposed
because
at such a young age?
You want to get, I hate using, I don't like using the language of addiction, but you want to get people in the habit of going to the theater, and you want to expose them.
Hey, listen, as habits go,
as
it's
habits
a pretty
go,
darn
it's
good
not
one.
a bad one, but you want to get them used to going to the theater. You want them to understand that it's a possibility for them. And I think, more and more, we have to figure out how to take that experience of sitting in the theater and integrate it with a digital culture, right? You can't say we're not moving into a digital culture. We are, but you have to figure out there's still a place for that experience of being in the theater. You may want to tweet about it the minute you're done. There's a whole lot of ways that 2 things can go together, but it's really important from an early age. We know that kids going to the theater or kids making theater, participating in the arts, really are great predicators of what's going forward.
Victoria Bailey is the executive director of a wonderful organization doing really important things for people who need this kind of help, the Theater Development Fund, because going to the theater and having that access is our birthright.
It's our birthright.
I love how you said that.
It's our birthright.
And just like public television should be our birthright,
That's right.
but we have to support it. Thank you.
You so much.
Great job.
Thanks.
One on One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating 25 years of broadcast excellence in partnership with St. Joseph's Healthcare System. This special edition of One on One with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center. Funding has been provided by Hackensack University Health Network, County College of Morris, PSE&G, MD Advantage Insurance Company of New Jersey, Wells Fargo, Celgene Corporation, and by Kessler Foundation. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.